Welcome back to Flicks with Nick, the ultimate soundtrack evaluation, and today we are hitting you on the road from Nashville, Tennessee, where we're not only making a change in location, but a change in genre. We're not just going to talk about video games today, but we're going to talk about movies. And video games and movies alike, soundtracks go in two different ways. You have video games and movies that rely on a score, which is a soundtrack made specifically by a composer to assist the footage that you see on screen. This is in most video games we play, like Minecraft, Skyrim, and Legend of Zelda, and it's in a lot of movies too, like Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and The Incredibles. And then you also have the movies and games that rely on a soundtrack or a composition of pre-existing music. Great examples of this for games are sports games like the FIFA soundtrack or Tony Hawk Pro Skater. And then for movies, you have things like Guardians of the Galaxy, Baby Driver, and then the movie we're going to talk about today, Shrek. When the conversation is around soundtracks for movies and games, it seems like a lot more people are impressed with original scores over the compilations of pre-existing music, and for good reason too. Most of the movies known to be the best of all time are praised for their amazing music, and there's so many great composers out there who make that possible. But something that doesn't seem to get the recognition it deserves is a great soundtrack made from pre-existing songs picked out to fit the mood of the movie perfectly. Finding songs that can bring out the emotion in a scene with lyrics that match up to what's going on in the movie is really hard, but when it's done right, it can make the movie a classic. And a perfect example of this is Shrek. So many people consistently talk about this movie for its great soundtrack, and that's for a good reason too. But today I don't want to just talk about why Shrek has a great soundtrack. I want to figure out which soundtrack out of the 4 Shrek movies is the best. My plan is simple. I will watch every Shrek movie and individually rate each song on the soundtrack by how much I like the song by itself, how much the song matches the mood in the scene, and how much the lyrics match what's going on in the scene. I'll take the average of those 3 scores, and that will be my score for the song. Then I'll take the average of every score from every song on the soundtrack, and that will be my score for the whole movie. Oh yeah, and I brought along 2 experts, Chance and Taylor, to do the exact same thing. After taking the average of all 3 of our scores, that will be the score for the movie, and after doing that for all 4 movies, we'll be able to crown our champion. Before we start, let me talk about what we counted as a song for the soundtrack, because we didn't just want to pull up the soundtrack for the movie on YouTube and rate the songs. I mean, we're really serious about this. The only songs we counted were songs in the movie that lasted longer than 20 seconds, had a singer, and only the first song that played during the credits. Now let's do this! No!
That must be Lord Farquaad's castle.
That's the place.
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
And welcome back to Flicks with Nick Day 2. We have watched all the Shrek movies, and starting with Shrek 1, we're gonna see what it's all about. The original Shrek was off to a perfect start with All Star by Smash Mouth as its intro.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me.
The mood of the song mixed with the lyrical meaning represented the scene very well, and for that it got 5s across the board. Later in the movie we had Bad Reputation, the song that plays during the scene where Shrek and Donkey fight the knights, and it scored very well with a 4.5. Unfortunately, the lowest scoring song on the soundtrack was My Beloved Monster, the song that plays during the love scene between Shrek and Fiona while they're abusing animals. And the song scored very well with Taylor's 4.3, but unfortunately Chance's score of a 2.7 dragged it down to the very bottom. We're here live with Chance to ask him personally why he gave this song a 2.7.
Well, to be frank, I just listened to it and I was like, oh, this is a pretty good song. But I think what it was mainly just the singer.
And the big surprise in the movie was Hallelujah. The song isn't the version we loved by Leonard Cohen, but it's actually the cover by Rufus Wainwright, and although it scored pretty alright with Chance and me, Taylor was not happy with it and actually gave it a 2.3, dragging the final score down to a 3.6. And we're gonna have to ask her what she thinks about that.
Honestly, after listening back to it, I have no idea why I gave it a 2.3. I actually like the Rufus dude and his version of the song.
It was almost the worst song on the whole soundtrack, and it's because of you. And I'm a Believer by Smash Mouth, of course, got 5s across the board. With a few other songs rounding out our soundtrack of 8 songs, Shrek 1 ended with a final score of 4.17. All Star and I'm a Believer were our top songs, with My Beloved Monster coming in last. Guys, do we have any final thoughts on the soundtrack?
Yes, this is a great movie, a great soundtrack, and the movie was greatly enhanced by the soundtrack.
Okay.
Catnip.
That's no mine.
Shrek 2 is lucky to start off strong with Accidentally in Love, which scored great with a 4.7.
Hey guys, it's Editing Nick here. So while I was shooting this video, there was a band playing a house show a few streets over from our house, and at the exact time I was talking about Accidentally in Love, they were playing the same song during their show. I tried turning up the sound really loud in editing so you could hear, and you can barely make it out, but you can hear them going into the chorus right here when I realized what's going on.
Whoa. Listen to the song they're playing. That's literally the song I'm currently talking about. That's so weird. Everyone needs to acknowledge how weird that is. Funky Town was up next with another high score of 4.7, but similar to Accidentally in Love, the score was dragged down by Taylor's score of 4. We're here with Taylor to ask her why, despite Chance and I giving Funky Town and Accidentally in Love 5s, why she decided to give both songs a 4.
I think Funky Town is an absolute bop, but the lyrical content did not go with the soundtrack.
Okay.
Some lower scoring songs on the soundtrack were I Need Some Sleep and Ever Fallen in Love with scores of 3.8 and 3. I actually happen to like I Need Some Sleep better than both of them. I gave it a 4.7, they both gave it a 3.3. Thought it fit perfectly. It was a nice, the mood was a little bit lower, but the rest of the soundtrack scored off the charts. We had Changes with a 4.9, Livin' La Vida Loca with a 4.9, and our only perfect 5 out of 5 for the film, Holding Out for a Hero, which plays during the climax of the movie.
Not the gumdrop button!
Although the original Shrek had 2 perfect scores, Shrek 2 seemed a little bit more consistent overall, and because of that, it passed Shrek 1 with a great score of 4.36. Our total scores were Taylor with 4.03, Chance with 4.11, and I gave the movie a 4.68. I definitely like the movie and soundtrack and appreciate music more than them two. I think that's why I ended up scoring it higher. And does anyone have any final thoughts on Shrek 2?
I don't think you were critiquing the soundtrack. You were just saying you liked it. We were supposed to be critiquing it. That's why I gave it a lower score.
Critiquing isn't a negative term. Do you have anything to say about the Shrek 2 soundtrack?
Good stuff.
Okay.
Ah! Oh! Donkey! Donkey! Wake up! Ah! Ah!
Da-da!
Shrek III is an interesting change in the series because it has less songs than the other 2 soundtracks, and each song plays for a significantly less time in this movie than the other 2. It just didn't really seem like the soundtrack was at the forefront of the movie like it did for Shrek 1 and 2. Royal Pain started the soundtrack off pretty strong with a 4.2, but it was pretty quickly dragged down by Live and Let Die during the king's funeral later in the movie. We all kind of agreed that the song didn't really match the mood as well as it could have, and because of that it got a 3.9. The lowest scoring song for the whole soundtrack was Joker and the Thief, which I personally liked because I thought it fit the scene well and I liked the song. But Taylor and Chance gave it a score of 3 and 2.3, and because of that, it got a 3.2. Chance, you gave one of the lowest scores out of all 4 movies to Joker and the Thief and Shrek III with a score of 2.3. My question for you is, why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I just found it to be a little annoying. I don't really have a lot to say about it. It didn't click with me. And if it didn't click, it didn't click.
The soundtrack didn't have a single perfect scoring song this time around, but the highest scoring song was 9 Crimes. It got a score of 4.8 and was only dragged down by my score of 4.3, only because I didn't really see the lyrics and mood matching up as well as some of the other songs did. Does anyone have any strong statements to make about 9 Crimes by Damien Rice?
Damien Rice is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Damien Rice. Overall, the soundtrack kind of disappointed all of us because the songs didn't really feel like they had an essential part in the movie, and honestly, I expected the score to be lower, but the soundtrack was pretty short and it didn't really have a lot of duds. In the end, it scored lower than Shrek 1 and 2, but still got a pretty decent score of 4.11. Does anyone have any final statements about the Shrek III soundtrack?
It definitely was pretty strong, but not as strong as the first or the second.
Strong soundtrack for an alright movie.
Although Shrek III came away with a powerful message, the soundtrack didn't do the same. With a small soundtrack and not a lot of punch, this movie was definitely the weakest of the three.
Please, Felicia, not in Daddy's ear.
Excuse me, Mr. Shrek. Could you do that ogre roar of yours for my son? He's a big, big fan.
Do the roar.
Shrek Forever After. Oh boy. Oh boy. Shrek Forever After was a bit of a mess. First of all, the soundtrack was several songs shorter than any of the other movies, with only 5 songs playing throughout the whole entire thing. Aside from the soundtrack, it's just not really a great movie at all, and the songs could have made it better, but unfortunately they did not. Rumpelstiltskin was a character in Shrek III, but Shrek Forever After decided to completely ignore that, redesign the character, and act like we never saw him before.
And you, Frumpy Pigskin,
Rumpelstiltskin.
where's that firstborn you were promised, eh?
He's devious, he's deceitful, he's...
Rumpelstiltskin!
They couldn't even come up with another fairy tale villain that we haven't seen yet in the first 3 movies, and I just feel like a big budget movie production could have planned that in advance. Our best song was Top of the World, which played during Shrek's new day as an ogre. The next track was Darling I Do, which got a 4.3, but then every other song was just such a letdown. Isn't It Strange and Click Click got a 3.6 and a 3.2. And then Shrek Forever After had the nerve to end the movie with I'm a Believer, but not the original by Smash Mouth, but the cover by Weezer, and for that the movie is unforgivable, and it's definitely the worst in the series. I'm a Believer covered by Weezer. Thoughts?
Absolutely disgusting. Ruined the entire movie.
Not it.
Trash, and that's understating it. We had to give it a 2.4, which brought our final score for Shrek Forever After to a 3.6. Does anyone have any final thoughts on Shrek Forever After?
Mediocre soundtrack for a very poorly written movie.
Seriously.
Boo! And with the highest score of 4.36, we crown our champion, the best Shrek movie soundtrack of all time, to be Shrek II. Even though I think Shrek 1 is the best movie in the entire series, I think Shrek 2 comes very close, and the soundtrack is definitely the best. Almost every song feels like it was made just for the movie, and I gave perfect scores to over half of the songs in the soundtrack. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please subscribe and come back every Monday for a new video. My recommendation for this week is a fighting game called Duck Game. Get it? I don't even have anything to say about it. And this week's Gamer of the Week is the kid in Shrek Forever After who tells Shrek to
Do the roar.
Could you do that ogre roar of yours for my son? He's a big, big fan.
Do the roar.
You know, I'd rather not.
Do the roar.
How about one of those famous Shrek roars?
Do the roar.
You don't want to see me angry, do you?
Do it. Daddy, he's getting away. Do something.
I believe you promised my son a roar.
Do the roar.
Ah, roar.
I don't like it. I love you, Daddy.